The world didn't expect a story like this to unfold in the final months of the year, yet here we are, watching humanity hold its breath over a single object drifting through the emptiness of interstellar space. It appeared quietly at first, another faint point of light on the endless astronomical charts. But within days, that point transformed into a mystery so profound that the entire scientific community swung its attention toward it like iron pulled to a magnet. They now call it 3I/ATLAS, the third interstellar visitor ever recorded in the history of our species. But the name is almost irrelevant. What matters is what it's doing, what it refuses to stop doing, and the terrifying possibility that its behavior is not merely unusual but impossible. The story begins with an acceleration, not a large one, not enough to panic anyone, not yet, but enough to confuse the algorithms tracking the object's orbit, a micro-deviation, a whisper of motion out of sync with the gravity that should have controlled it. At first, astronomers blamed dust jets, sublimation, the usual suspects, until they realized the numbers didn't match the textbook. To generate the observed acceleration naturally, the object would have needed to shed up to 15% of its mass. No comet could survive that kind of catastrophic erosion while maintaining structural integrity, and yet 3I/ATLAS did. It kept moving, smooth, stable, precise. Then came the light, the strange soft blue that coated its spectrum like a glow from a material unknown to any catalog on Earth. Scientists compared it to exotic ices, rare compounds, even hypothetical crystalline lattices that shouldn't exist, but none of them explained the pattern. The reflection behaved like engineered matter, something polished, something structured, something that wasn't supposed to be floating alone in the darkness between stars. Still, the community urged caution. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but evidence was exactly what the universe was preparing to provide. In early October, 3I/ATLAS swung through perihelion, dipping into the searing radiance of the sun. It should have boiled violently, cracked, fragmented under the stress of receiving nearly 770 watts of energy per square meter. Instead, something else happened, something no observatory was prepared for. Plumes erupted from its surface, not the gentle fountains of vapor typical of comets, but focused jets, needle-thin and unyielding, streaming into space with unimaginable coherence. 7 distinct jets were identified in the first set of images. Some pointed away from the sun, which would be expected, but 2 of them pointed toward the sun, fighting directly against the direction of thermal pressure. Natural bodies do not do that. Natural bodies cannot do that. As the days passed, the plumes grew. One reached a length of 1 million kilometers. Another stretched past 3 million, a cosmic spear glowing against the solar wind, plasma models shattered in confusion. To maintain that shape, that density, that direction, the jet would need to be 1 million times denser than any naturally sublimated material ever recorded. The calculations were so extreme that several researchers asked whether the instruments were malfunctioning. They weren't. The data matched across observatories the plumes were real. The question was whether the object itself was. By mid-November, rumors began circulating privately. Researchers whispered about artificial thrust, ion propulsion, directed plasma exhaust technologies beyond human engineering, perhaps centuries or millennia ahead. The whispers turned into speculation when new amateur images revealed something chilling, a stable, bright point at the center of the object, not flickering, not evolving, a steady, luminous core, almost like a controlled reactor shining faintly through layers of dust and vapor. If the structure were collapsing, that point would wobble or vanish, but it didn't. It held firm as if the object were maintaining itself deliberately. NASA's HiRISE mission was scheduled to release high-resolution images shortly after the perihelion pass, but then the government shutdown froze every pending transmission. The timing couldn't have been more suspicious. Data that should have been public remained locked behind institutional barriers. When asked for comment, spokespersons insisted it was a simple bureaucratic delay. Nothing more. But people did not believe that. Not after the jets, not after the spectral anomalies, not after the object's erratic but controlled acceleration, now deviating by a measurable margin equivalent to 10 Earth diameters over the span of a month. Into this storm stepped Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, a figure both respected and controversial, known for his boldness and refusal to sugarcoat scientific uncertainty. Standing before a crowded academic panel, he delivered a single line that ricocheted through every research institution on Earth. "I hope 3I/ATLAS does not bring us an unwanted Christmas gift." The room fell silent. Was it humor, a warning, a clue? Only Loeb knew the answer, and he offered no clarification. Instead, he doubled down on criticism of those he called intellectually complacent, scientists too attached to conventional models to acknowledge evidence that points elsewhere. He reminded them of Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor, and how the mainstream instinctively labeled it a dark comet, despite lacking a tail, lacking gas release, lacking rotational stability, and exhibiting unexplained acceleration. If it does not behave like a comet, Loeb said, why insist that it is one? He accused the community of forcing new mysteries into old boxes, suffocating discovery under the weight of tradition. And now, with 3I/ATLAS, producing directed plumes at velocities approaching thousands of meters per second, he warned that denying the possibility of technological origin would be unscientific. The tension escalated further when radio observatories detected, for the first time in history, a signal from the region surrounding the object, 2 absorption lines of hydroxyl, a signature typically associated with the presence of water vapor or oxygen-bearing molecules. But what alarmed researchers wasn't the chemistry itself. It was the strength and narrowness of the signal, suggesting an organized, coherent source rather than chaotic natural release. Still, caution remained. Natural explanations, though strained, were not impossible. Yet every new data set made the natural scenario feel thinner, more desperate, as if nature itself were warning, "This does not belong to me." At the same time, something stranger emerged. Another object was discovered, an entirely separate body, reported by astronomer Gennady Borisov. Its orbital inclination was nearly perpendicular to that of 3I/ATLAS, yet the timing of its appearance was uncanny. Both objects entered observational range almost on the same week, an alignment that probability deemed extremely unlikely. No gravitational connection existed. No known mechanism tied their trajectories together, but the coincidence fueled a new question, whispered only in private circles. What if 3I/ATLAS was not alone? What if it was part of something larger, something coordinated? And then came the most unsettling idea of all, the possibility that 3I/ATLAS was a parent vessel, shedding smaller components into different vectors throughout the solar system. Not weapons, not probes, instruments. Silent messengers mapped across space with unknowable intent. The theory remained unproven, but after the jets, the stable core, the acceleration, the spectral anomalies, the radio signal, no one dared dismiss it outright. Humanity stood gazing into the sky, waiting. The days grew shorter. The object moved closer, and somewhere deep inside the darkness, behind its glowing plumes and impossible behavior, the truth waited, cold, patient, inevitable. As 3I/ATLAS continued its silent glide through the inner solar system, the tension surrounding it hardened into something heavier than curiosity. It felt like anticipation mixed with dread, like standing before a sealed door, knowing something is waiting behind it. Something that will not disappear simply because humanity is unprepared. Every observatory, from the amateurs with backyard telescopes to world-class facilities, began tracking the object with obsessive precision. Even the slightest flicker of brightness, the smallest deviation in motion, became global news within hours. People no longer asked whether the object was unusual. They asked how unusual, and whether unusual was still a strong enough word. The jets grew brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again, as if pulsing. Some scientists suggested this was due to variable solar heating. Others countered that the pattern was too rhythmic, too clean, almost like a controlled modulation. The plumes maintained their impossible structure, razor straight and unnervingly stable, slicing across the darkness like needles of light. At their maximum length, the secondary tail stretched nearly 3 million kilometers, large enough to wrap around Earth 200 times. No natural comet had ever produced anything like it in such a short span of time. Models that once confidently predicted jet expansion broke apart under the weight of the new data. The strangest changes came not from the plumes, but from the object's spin. Early measurements suggested a slow, uneven rotation. But as it approached its outbound trajectory, something shifted. The rotation stabilized, uniform, balanced. A natural object undergoing extreme outgassing should wobble violently, like a stone thrown into a river. Instead, 3I/ATLAS corrected itself. The stabilization looked intentional, calculated, like a spacecraft adjusting its attitude as it prepared for a maneuver. Then, unexpectedly, the jets paused. For nearly 18 minutes, every plume faded into darkness. Observatories panicked, believing the object might be collapsing internally. But then, precisely at the 18th minute, the plumes reignited, stronger, sharper, and more narrowly focused than before. The timing was too clean for randomness. It felt like a reset, a calibration, a pulse of control. Even those who hated speculation could not ignore the pattern anymore. NASA's silence only amplified the spiral. For the first time in decades, the agency refused to release its pre-processed data from the HiRISE imaging session. Engineers claimed they were waiting for clearance. Scientists muttered that clearance had never been required for a comet. The public simply stared at the empty data portal and asked the question no one wanted to articulate. What did NASA see? Journalists pressed the issue. Leaked whispers spoke of unusual structural geometry, layered symmetry, and internal reflectivity inconsistent with ice. The rumors multiplied faster than NASA could deny them, and in the vacuum of information, suspicion bloomed like wildfire. Why block the images now, when every telescope on Earth was pointed at the same target? Why insist on bureaucratic delays at the exact moment the world was demanding clarity? Avi Loeb spoke again, this time with unmistakable frustration. "Science cannot function under a blanket," he said, his tone sharp. "If the data challenges our models, we must confront it, not smother it under paperwork." His words circulated globally within minutes, igniting debate across universities, observatories, online forums, and social media. Some accused him of fueling hysteria. Others hailed him as the only voice willing to say what everyone else was thinking. Amid the controversy, new radiometric data emerged from the McCath VR array. Not only did the hydroxyl absorption lines remain present, they appeared to shift slightly, as if responding to changes within the object. Natural sources usually produce chaotic, unpredictable curves. But these lines moved with a strange coherence, as if tied to a mechanism rather than chemistry. The signal wasn't strong enough to be called communication, but it wasn't weak enough to dismiss as noise. A line had been crossed, something was happening. Meanwhile, the second object discovered by Borisov continued to follow its eccentric, perpendicular orbit. At first, astronomers assumed it was simply another interstellar body, unrelated to 3I/ATLAS. But then came the timing charts, the uncomfortable revelation that both objects became visible at nearly the same solar longitude, within the same observational window, just days apart. The cosmic coincidence grew difficult to ignore. Two interstellar objects arriving at once was improbable. Two arriving at once and both showing anomalous characteristics felt like the beginning of a pattern. Theories evolved quickly. The most controversial one suggested 3I/ATLAS wasn't merely a vessel, it was a carrier, a hub, a node, a central body releasing smaller units along different trajectories, like seeds drifting across a field in calculated formation. Some speculated these smaller objects could be probes. Others wondered if they were sensors, autonomous instruments designed to study gravitational wells, magnetic fields, or planetary atmospheres. The most unsettling question was the simplest. Why now? Humanity had existed for 200,000 years without witnessing anything like this. Yet suddenly, in the age of digital observation, in an era where every amateur can scan the sky with a few $1,000s of equipment, an object appears behaving like a machine. Had it been here before? Had others passed unnoticed in the centuries when the sky was dark, empty, and unobserved? The narrative shifted again when a group in Chile captured a faint but disturbing image. What looked like micro fragments trailing behind three I/ATLAS, but not dispersing like debris. They formed a pattern, a formation, equidistant, linear, almost like a string of satellites, following a parent structure with obedient precision. The image was blurry, low resolution, but the pattern was unmistakable enough to ignite global speculation. If this was fragmentation, it was unlike any natural breakup ever recorded. If it was controlled separation, then the implications were far greater. Public interest exploded. News anchors spoke about it daily. Scientists debated until dawn. Conspiracy theorists flooded the internet with dramatic declarations. Children pointed to the sky at night, trying to glimpse the spark that might rewrite human history. There was fear, but also an eerie sense of wonder, an ancient curiosity awakening in the modern world. Humanity knew it was watching something significant, perhaps the most significant event in its existence. The question was no longer whether 3 I/ATLAS was natural or artificial. The question was what would happen next, because the object was now approaching its closest distance to Earth, and every hour its behavior grew more deliberate. The countdown toward closest approach began quietly, almost ceremonially, as if the world understood it was standing on the edge of something monumental. Every major observatory was now synchronized to track 3 I/ATLAS with maximum resolution the moment it cleared the glare of the sun. The window would last only minutes, but those minutes might decide how history would remember this object, an exotic comet or the first confirmed artifact of an intelligence beyond Earth. As December 19th approached, the object's behavior grew even more perplexing. Its jets no longer behaved like expulsions of dust or gas. They narrowed into thread-like beams, maintaining their shape across distances so vast no natural plume could possibly remain coherent. They bent minutely, precisely, as if responding to internal instructions, and through it all, the central luminous core remained unchanged, a cold, unwavering star imprisoned within the drifting body. On the night before closest approach, a sudden flare erupted, a sharp spike in brightness that lasted only 5 seconds but was captured by over a dozen amateur telescopes. Analysts expected fragmentation, a collapse, a violent outburst. But when the images were compared, 3 I/ATLAS looked identical to before. No debris, no disruption, only that brief pulse of light, as if the object had announced itself. Then came the shift. At 3:12 UTC, the acceleration anomaly intensified. Not subtly, not gradually, it surged. The object's trajectory began to alter by a few fractions of a degree. Tiny yet unmistakably deliberate orbital simulations went into chaos. Predictions diverged wildly. Not one explanation fit the behavior. A natural body cannot simply change course without losing mass, shedding material, or displaying obvious asymmetry. But 3 I/ATLAS showed none of those signs. It moved cleanly, smoothly, as if adjusting its path with invisible thrusters. By sunrise, the theory that had been whispered for weeks burst into the open. The object was not falling apart, it was maneuvering. NASA remained silent. The high-rise images remained locked. The world waited for answers. When the moment finally came, When 3I/ATLAS slipped into the narrow observational corridor between sunlight and darkness, telescopes triggered automatically, dozens of images snapped each second, spectrographs hummed, data poured into servers across the globe. And then something happened that no one expected. The jets vanished, not gradually, instantly. One frame showed the plumes stretching across millions of kilometers. The next frame showed none at all. The tail collapsed into silence like a torch extinguished in a vacuum. Even the luminous core dimmed, shrinking into a faint glow barely strong enough to register. It was as if the object were hiding, veiling itself at the exact moment humanity attempted to expose it. A second theory emerged, one even more unsettling than the first. What if the object wasn't shutting down? What if it was observing us in return? The seconds ticked onward. The data streamed in, and then, in the midst of the fading jets and dimming light, a shape emerged. Not a clear one, not enough to declare certainty, but enough to rupture the boundaries of the natural world. The body of 3I/ATLAS appeared faceted, not round, not rugged like a comet, but segmented, almost geometric panels, angles, lines that curved too evenly to be sculpted by nature. A shadowed ridge, a straight, unnatural edge, something that looked frighteningly close to structure. But just as the details began to sharpen, a surge of solar interference washed across the sensors. The window closed. The object drifted back into glare and vanished from visible range. The world had seen only a glimpse, but a glimpse was enough. Even the most conservative astronomers could no longer deny the implications. The jets, the acceleration, the controlled rotation, the puzzling radio lines, the geometric shadow. One scientist, speaking anonymously, said, "If this is a comet, then we need a new word for comet and a new physics to describe it." As debate erupted, the object continued outward, leaving behind a thin trail of ionized particles like a fading signature against the black. Over the following days, the brightness stabilized again, but without the massive plumes that had defined its earlier behavior, it looked quieter now, still moving, still accelerating, but heading deeper into the solar system, toward the outer planets, toward the dark. Some believed it was retreating. Others believed it had simply completed its task. Avi Loeb addressed the public one final time, speaking with the calm of a man who understood the magnitude of what had just happened. "We must confront the evidence before us," he said. "Nature does not create precision. Nature does not create intention, but something, somewhere, does. And today, we may have seen the first trace of it." Humanity was left with a single image, a blurred silhouette with the faintest suggestion of engineered symmetry, not enough to proclaim contact, but too much to dismiss as coincidence. News networks replayed the frame endlessly. Analysts argued. Skeptics scoffed. Children stared at the sky at night, searching for the object that had passed them in silence. And the final question, the one whispered across every forum, every newsroom, every observatory, lingered like a pulse beneath the surface of the world. Was 3I/ATLAS a dying comet struggling against the sun? Or was it the first deliberate gesture, subtle, cautious, distant, of a civilization older than Earth, watching us from the void? The universe did not answer, but the silence felt different now, as if something out there was listening and waiting.